The invoice that shattered the illusion was never meant to surface, and when it did, it didn't just expose a bill, it exposed a betrayal.
This is Meghan Markle's sickest stunt yet.
I mean, other than looking like a toilet roll, Meghan Markle is contributing absolutely nothing.
That whisper from a Paris hotel insider? It wasn't random. It was a warning, because those documents, those cold, itemized, merciless documents weren't just numbers on paper. They were proof. Thousands of euros, penthouse suite charges, designer fittings stacked like trophies, private security billed by the hour, and every single luxury dripping in mystery because the name covering it all was nowhere Meghan Markle wanted it to be. At first, it looked harmless. Another glamorous Paris Fashion Week story. Another Duchess turned global icon stepping back into couture and camera flashes. The headlines sparkled. The photos gleamed. A comeback, they said. A reset. A triumphant return wrapped in Balenciaga rumors and whispered power moves. But then the digging started. Reporters began asking simple questions. Who paid? Which brand signed off? Why were there multiple authorization codes on a single stay? Why did one invoice list a luxury fashion house while another pointed to a Los Angeles corporation that seemed to exist only on paper? And when Balenciaga was contacted, they denied everything. Flat, immediate, firm. The silence from her camp after that was deafening. Suddenly, this wasn't about fashion. It wasn't about glamour. It was about a paper trail that stretched from Paris penthouses deep into Hollywood's elite circles and straight into the heart of her marriage. Because insiders were already whispering something explosive, Harry didn't know. They say when those receipts began circulating in private media groups, Meghan was shaken, tearful, furious, scrambling to figure out who leaked what she believed was sealed tight behind NDAs and palace walls. But Harry, he was blindsided. Absolutely blindsided. The question wasn't just who paid. It was why. Because every signature on those invoices hinted at something darker than sponsorship. They suggested illusion, maintenance, preservation of image at any cost. And when the truth began leaking, it didn't just end a trip, it detonated trust.
Maybe Harry's no use to Meghan anymore. Maybe the divorce rumors are actually true.
Early October 2025, Avenue Montaigne lit up with flashing cameras as Meghan stepped out of a black SUV wrapped in custom couture and curated confidence. The narrative was flawless. Comeback queen, reborn tastemaker, global humanitarian blending elegance with influence. But inside the hotel, behind polished marble counters and discreet concierge smiles, something else was unfolding. A staff accountant, under pressure, under scrutiny, quietly scanned invoices and shared them with a French entertainment journalist. Not gossip, not rumor, hard copies. Digital timestamps, payment codes. Within hours, whispers turned into proof. The bookings didn't align. One listed under a luxury brand, another under a Los Angeles corporation with no clear ties. Authorization codes clashed, dates overlapped, and when the fashion house was asked again, the denial came sharper. Silence followed, and in that silence, the illusion cracked.
Meghan Markle is always attempting to, shall we say, build relationships with very, very, very rich men.
We did not sponsor her. That single line detonated across French media like a bomb dropped in couture. Screenshots blurred but unmistakable. Penthouse suite line items, 3,200 stylist retainers, late night room service, private transport, all dissected by online sleuths who treated those invoices like forensic evidence. For the first time since leaving royal life, Meghan wasn't controlling the narrative. The headlines multiplied. Who paid? Who approved? Who leaked? Paris Fashion Week flipped overnight from fairy tale to scandal, and the answers weren't on the runway. They were buried in paperwork. But here's what makes it even messier. This wasn't random. Weeks before Fashion Week, her return had been choreographed down to the smallest detail.
Harry just can't give her anything else anymore. He served his purpose. His purpose is over. So it's time to move on.
Her team framed the trip as empowerment, a global figure reclaiming her image. Every photo curated, every angle approved. The Plaza Athene stay wasn't just accommodation, it was symbolism. Regal yet reborn, modern grace, humanitarian glamour. For a moment, it worked. Social media reposted every shot. Tabloids praised the rumored Balenciaga partnership as proof she was back inside fashion's inner sanctum. Even critics admitted she'd mastered reinvention. But behind the scenes, NDAs were flying. Hotel staff signed confidentiality agreements. Photographers were restricted to flattering angles. Costs strictly off limits. It looked effortless. It was anything but. Industry insiders were already whispering doubts. No brand confirmation. No official hosting acknowledgement. Press briefings didn't align. And then, then one stylist said something that sent chills through editorial circles. They talked like ambassadors, but signed like freelancers. That single booking line, the one marked confirmed by sponsor, didn't match the fantasy. And once that line slipped out, everything unraveled. An anonymous email attachment landed in a European journalist's inbox. Scanned invoices, digital time codes, detailed breakdowns of every euro spent. What looked routine turned unsettling fast. Guest information didn't match public statements. Payment authorization pointed to a third party, not her foundation, not her media office. Each page told a different story. Private transportation, designer fittings, midnight suite upgrades, initials attached to approvals that didn't belong to any known assistant, and that handwritten note, confirmed by sponsor. Within hours, bloggers lined up timelines. Investigative pages circled inconsistencies with surgical precision. What once looked like effortless glamour now felt like something financed from shadows. Her publicist's number went dead. Scheduled appearances vanished. And then the security contradiction exploded. There she was, walking openly in Paris crowds, while Harry had previously argued in court about security risks, claiming he and his family didn't feel safe without taxpayer protection. The contrast was brutal. If security was such a concern, who funded this private detail? Why did it appear so fluid in Paris? And again, who paid? That question took over everything. And then came the name. Not a full name, initials. But behind those initials was a connection that rattled her inner circle. Journalists traced digital signatures, payment processors, offshore contacts. A pattern emerged. The same electronic signature linked to past media investments tied back to a wealthy Los Angeles figure from Meghan's pre-royal orbit. Insiders called him Mr. X. His role wasn't public, but fragments suggested he personally facilitated payments through a company account to keep his identity shielded. And suddenly, this wasn't about fashion. It was about motive, loyalty, influence, old debts, strategic alliance? When the first article hinting at Mr. X went live, insiders described tension so thick it felt suffocating. Meghan reportedly pacing, emotional, furious, trying to identify the leak. Harry, sources claim, learned about the Mr. X revelation not from her, but from the media. That cut deep. Trust shifted. Conversations turned sharp. Shared decisions suddenly felt questionable. What began as a glamorous weekend collapsed into something far heavier. Invoices, secrets, and a name neither of them could publicly address without detonating something bigger. Hashtags exploded. Headlines screamed betrayal. Archived press releases vanished. Interviews were quietly pulled. Promotional fashion images disappeared as if someone was scrubbing the internet in real time. Emergency meetings. Late-night strategy calls. Deny? Clarify? Stay silent? Each choice carried a price. Silence looked like guilt. Denial risked exposure. The truth was already outrunning damage control. Elite invitations quietly vanished. Partnerships stalled. Collaborations reconsidered. And inside that pressure cooker, something even more dangerous began surfacing. A pattern. Because this wasn't the first time reinvention was followed by unraveling. Grand entrance. Loud praise. Sudden crack. Disappear. Reappear. Reset. Paris wasn't just a scandal, it was a mirror. And as analysts debated whether this was chaos or choreography, one question refused to fade. Was this an accident, or was it strategy that spiraled beyond control? Because in Martin fame, repetition is rarely random. And now the question wasn't just who paid for Paris, it was how much truth was still negotiable. Because by the time the storm slowed just slightly, the damage wasn't surface level, it was structural. The Paris trip had been designed as a renaissance, a reset button wrapped in silk and flashbulbs. Instead, it turned into a forensic audit of image, influence, and illusion. And inside Montecito, according to insiders, the temperature changed overnight. They say Harry wasn't just upset. He was furious in a way that felt different. Not the public fury he directs at tabloids or palace insiders, but something personal, something closer to disbelief. Because if the Mr. X payments were real and if the invoices were accurate, then someone inside their carefully guarded circle had made decisions that could ripple far beyond Fashion Week. Trust doesn't crack loudly, it fractures quietly. And people noticed. Charity appearances that followed looked rehearsed, polite, smiles stretched thin like fabric pulled too tight. Observers pointed out how they stood just slightly farther apart. Not dramatic, not explosive, just different. The internet doesn't miss shifts like that. Clips were replayed displayed in slow motion, micro-expressions analyzed. Body language experts flooded panels dissecting everything from eye contact to hand placement. Was he distant? Was she defensive? Was something breaking beneath the surface? The speculation fed itself because the receipts weren't disappearing. Every time someone tried to move the story forward, another detail resurfaced. The 3,200 stylist retainer, the handwritten confirmed by sponsor, the Los Angeles corporation with paper-thin visibility. The offshore processing trail journalist claimed to have mapped, and then came the ugliest rumor of all, that Mr. X wasn't just a financial backer, but a long-standing figure from Meghan's pre-royal Hollywood orbit, who allegedly saw value in keeping her name elevated inside elite circles. That theory alone ignited chaos. Was this loyalty, investment, strategic image preservation, or something far more complicated? No one could confirm, but no one could dismiss it either, because patterns started forming. Analysts revisited old timelines, old sponsorship whispers, old comeback moments that felt dazzling at first, then complicated weeks later. The rhythm was undeniable. Grand entrance, heavy praise, sudden unraveling. Critics called it opportunism. Supporters called it survival. But neutral observers began noticing something else. Every reinvention required resources that were never fully transparent. And transparency is oxygen in modern celebrity culture. Without it, doubt spreads fast. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the damage control machine reportedly went into overdrive. Crisis consultants, legal advisors, reputation managers, digital scrub teams attempting to minimize visibility of archived promotional material tied to Paris Fashion Week. But once paperwork hits the press, it rarely vanishes, especially when it carries timestamps. What made this scandal different wasn't the money, it was the contradiction, because Harry's ongoing public battles over security funding had framed the couple as vulnerable, at risk, needing protection. And yet in Paris, Meghan was photographed walking openly in crowded streets with fluid security arrangements that appeared seamlessly financed. The optics were brutal. Critics connected dots instantly. How could there be financial strained discussions on one side and undisclosed luxury sponsorships on the other? The contrast made even neutral commentators uneasy. And then something else happened. Elite doors began closing, quietly. Fashion insiders who had been publicly enthusiastic grew cautious. Invitations slowed. Collaborative conversations postponed. Editorial endorsements softened. No dramatic announcements, just absence. Reputation in those circles isn't lost overnight. It erodes. And erosion had started. Inside Hollywood, where perception is currency, the idea that a wealthy mystery benefactor was underwriting visibility created discomfort. Not because sponsorship is unusual, it's common, but because denial followed by exposure signals misalignment. And misalignment suggests risk. Risk is expensive. Meanwhile, online communities dug deeper into Mr. X threads, stretched across platforms speculating about identity, motive, connection to past ventures. Some theories were wild, others disturbingly detailed, none confirmed, all viral. And in the middle of it all stood a marriage already scrutinized from every angle. Or insiders claimed Harry felt humiliated not necessarily by the funding itself, but by the way it surfaced, by learning about details from headlines instead of conversations, by feeling for a moment outside the loop. If true, that cuts deeper than any invoice, because public couples survive scandals through unity, but unity requires alignment, and alignment requires trust. The couple's silence became its own headline. No joint statement clarifying the sponsor, no detailed explanation dismantling the inconsistencies, just carefully worded denials calling reports mischaracterized. Mischaracterized isn't disproven, it's vague, and vagueness breeds speculation. As weeks passed, analysts began zooming out. Paris wasn't isolated. It fit a broader arc of reinvention narratives that often soared quickly before encountering friction. Some argued it was media hostility. Others believed it was strategic controversy, outrage as oxygen to keep relevance burning. But this time, the paperwork complicated that theory, because paperwork doesn't rely on emotion, it relies on signatures, and those signatures pointed somewhere. Even if the full identity of Mr. X remained shielded, the pattern of digital authorization suggested deliberate facilitation, not casual generosity, which raised a harder question. Was this trip ever truly about fashion? Or was it about maintaining positioning inside circles where visibility equals leverage? Because in elite ecosystems, presence at Fashion Week isn't just aesthetic, it's symbolic. It signals access, influence, continued belonging. And belonging is everything. If someone funded that belonging behind the scenes, what were they buying? Exposure, association, influence, or simply proximity to a name that still commands headlines globally? Harry, meanwhile, faced his own reputational tremors. Commentary panels began shifting narrative focus toward him. Was he complicit? Was he unaware? Was he losing control of a story that once centered on unity and purpose? The Netflix jokes resurfaced. Cynical commentary suggesting every crisis could become content. Whether fair or not, the perception stuck. And perception, once planted, grows roots. By the time the storm slowed to a simmer, one reality remained clear: Paris changed something. The photographs still exist, immaculate, poised, polished, but now they carry subtext. Every smile analyzed through the lens of what was happening off camera. Every couture step shadowed by the echo of that invoice line, confirmed by sponsor. The question that once dominated, who paid, evolved into something deeper. Why was it hidden? Because sponsorship isn't scandalous. Secrecy is. If transparency had come first, perhaps the narrative would have been simple: a benefactor supporting a public figure's return to fashion prominence. But denial, followed by documentation, shifts tone. It creates doubt. And doubt lingers longer than headlines. As analysts debated intent versus accident, one idea kept resurfacing: Martin fame runs on choreography. And when choreography fails, the audience notices. Was this failed choreography or exposure of something never meant to be visible? For Meghan, the emotional toll reportedly ran high. Private frustration, fear that months of careful image rebuilding had fractured overnight. Friends urging retreat, advisors urging recalibration. For Harry, insiders whispered about reevaluation, not necessarily of marriage, but of strategy, of how narratives are managed, of who handles what behind the curtain. Because once the story outruns you, reclaiming it is almost impossible. Paris may fade from trending tabs eventually, but the pattern discussion won't. Reinvention, elevation, exposure, reset. It's a cycle that fascinates the public because it mirrors the machinery of modern celebrity itself. Every empire of image has a foundation, and foundations either hold under pressure or reveal cracks that were always there. The official version of the Paris trip may stand, or it may slowly dissolve as new details surface. But one truth remains undeniable. In the age of digital receipts, illusions rarely survive unscanned. And somewhere between Montecito and Paris, between penthouse suites and offshore processors, between whispered initials and public smiles, a line was crossed that can't be fully uncrossed. Because when the bill surfaces, so does the truth. And the truth, once itemized, refuses to disappear. Refuses to disappear. Refuses to disappear. Refuses to disappear.